This is Shu Hirata's Let's Talk Japanese Fight Sports with Charlie Jewett from sogokaku.com. Let's begin. Hey, good evening, Charlie.
Good morning, Shu. How are you?
Good. And good evening to everybody in Japan. Good morning to everybody in the States. And we're doing good. It's Monday morning. And yesterday was a big one for mixed martial arts and kickboxing day for Japan, right?
Absolutely. It was huge. There was actually a bunch of events going on.
Right.
Deep,
Have the one championship. Yeah, deep.
Deep Jewels and one championship.
Yeah. Let's talk about, although a lot of people probably wants to hear about the one championship, let's get to Suda submits Hamasaki, because that's a pretty big news, I thought.
Yeah, so I hadn't been to a deep event in a while, so I figured I wanted to see Hamasaki fight. She hadn't been the most active fighter. She's been injured recently. So I made my way down to New Pier Hall to watch this, and deep is popping. I mean, the venue was pretty full. There was a giant line to get in, and just a pretty good, everyone's into it, very big atmosphere. But the main event was clearly the big fight for a lot of people. And I looked into it. Hamasaki actually asked for this.
Mm-hmm.
So in her last RIZIN fight, she felt ring rust. She felt like she just wasn't the way she used to be, which makes sense. I mean, if you look at her record, she's been injured, so she hasn't been that active over the past 5 years, really.
Right.
And she went in there and fought Moetti Suda, who, despite only being 20, has actually a lot of fights.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure people that are familiar will know her father is a former MMA fighter who now runs a jiu-jitsu school. So she's been doing jiu-jitsu for a very long time. And what I liked about Moetti Suda going into this fight is she's a fearless kind of grappler on the ground, where she'll go for submissions. She's a chain submission artist. If she fails at something, she goes for something else. And she doesn't only do arm bars. She doesn't only do chokes. So she's dangerous kind of in all positions. And she actually said in the lead up to the fight that when she got offered this fight, she and her father started immediately training what to do when Hamasaki goes for the double wrist lock, and how to get out of that and how to counter that, because everyone knows. I mean, they used to call it the Hama lock. They kind of named it after. They gave her own name because Megumi Fuji had the Mega Lock, so Hamasaki had the Hama Lock. Well, Hamasaki kind of went for a judo throw. You can see this all on the Deep YouTube page. They uploaded it very quickly. And while she was doing that, Suda took her back.
Yeah, I mean, it's up on the YouTube now. Deep posted that fight pretty quickly, right after the fight. And I did see that as well. And she went for the judo throw, but usually her signature move is Uchimata, right? Inside the leg, but she couldn't nail that and tried to go to the outside. That's when she totally gave up her back. You know?
Well, Hamasaki almost has like this Sakuraba approach to like, I will do whatever it takes to get a hold of your arm.
Exactly, right. Easy to give up a back because she was so confident with that move, right? You know?
But I was immediately very attentive once Suda had both her hooks in and Hamasaki wasn't doing anything to get out of it. She was still kind of fighting with the arm.
Right.
I was like, this seems like the time to try to get out of the current position, but all credit to Suda. I mean, this is a point that I was telling my wife that I have been saying for a while now, is in Japan, especially in the women's scene, but also in the men's scene, you kind of have these veterans that have been there for such a long time. The younger generation just can't beat them. And so it's so refreshing to see like a young athlete get this opportunity,
right,
and just take it. Like, she showed no fear of Hamasaki. She wasn't disrespectful, but she went out there to win the fight. She won the fight, and this is huge. I mean, Deep was super smart. They immediately released it on their YouTube page. They're like, everybody needs to see what just happened. By beating Hamasaki, essentially a new star was born, because that's how big of a deal Hamasaki is on the women's MMA scene.
Right. But at the same time, remember we talked about, you just mentioned that Hamasaki felt she has a ring rust, right? Because she wasn't active enough. That's actually a problem about the Japanese women's MMA, because Once you go to RIZIN, of course, obviously they prefer to stay in RIZIN, fight in RIZIN, but the women's division is just not there. So look at Izawa, right? Even her, it's hard to make it her active.
And well, I mean, if you look at RIZIN's women's atomweight division, it's 5 fights a year now.
Exactly, right. And I'm also hearing the rumor that Izawa as a potential opponent on May Tokyo Dome is injured, so Izawa might not even to fight in that show. So we're really looking at more than 6 months of absence, even for a fighter like Izawa. So for Hamasaki, even though she's a former champ, it's hard to get her active. And next thing you know, how old is Hamasaki now? 41?
42.
42, and Suda is now 20. So I mean, exactly, you said it's finally the young ones beat the old guard, but I wish this happened a couple more years earlier. Instead of 42-year-old Hamasaki, I wish somebody did that when she was 37 or 38 kind of stuff, But again, so I think Izawa immediately commented that she would like to see Suda to fight Oshima again and take the winner.
So that's kind of an interesting fight because the first time they fought, Moe Suda is still growing. And if you compare her body to like a Hamasaki or like a Miki Matono, she doesn't have like the muscular build that they do. And so when she fought Oshima the first time, I mean, Oshima has been doing judo since she was like 3. She what I call big sistered her. She just threw her to the ground and like, I mean, Oshima just kicked her ass, put it lightly. I mean, she just like threw her down and was like, I've been doing this forever. You're just a little girl. So it would be interesting to see what happened now that Suda's getting a little older. She has more experience under her belt. But speaking of just the rising opportunities you're mentioning, just speaking to some of the fighters, it's all so up in the air when you talk to them. It's like, well, Izawa is supposed to be fighting this person, but RIZIN wants her to fight this person. So what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to wait around in case those fall through? So I think a lot of the women in Japan are struggling with finding fight opportunities right now.
Right. I mean, in terms of RIZIN, besides Izawa, I mean, only person probably RIZIN is willing to book as soon as possible will be Reina, right? Absolutely. I mean, obviously, yeah, because ticket seller, basically. And besides that, they're not really establishing that division. So just like how they're doing the flyweight, men's flyweight, to establish division, they got to bring in 4 or 5 non-Japanese, to bang the Japanese and stuff like that. But just not having enough Japanese fighters available too, right, on each division. So
people may forget Suda's actually fought and won in RIZIN before. I just think that I don't know what's going on in RIZIN, but they just seem not willing to build a division right now.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly. So there's questions here. So should Hamasaki now actually retire after this loss? Probably not. She should at least fight one more time, right?
I would say no, because I mean, physically she looked like she was in wonderful shape. It didn't look like, and it wasn't like a timing. It wasn't a knockout.
No.
I mean, she got caught with a rear naked shake earlier in a row. That happens.
Right. Besides, for RIZIN, it might make sense to do one fight for Hamasaki if she's retiring. That's another, like a sort of like a good card that they could come up with, right?
Yeah, but I mean, getting submitted by a jiu-jitsu fighter on the ground, there's no shame in that.
Right. Now, Suda versus Izawa now, I actually think what RIZIN really wants to do Izawa versus Reina. And they will try to make that happen, right? I mean, unless if Reina is injured and stuff like that.
From what I've heard, the fight that I don't think Izawa wants Reina, but RIZIN really wants Reina versus Izawa for the fight in May.
Yeah,
that's what I've heard.
It's true, yes.
In my opinion on the Suda versus Izawa is I think Suda's too young. And I would let her just keep building her confidence, build her up a little more, build a division, and then have her work her way up and fight Izawa.
See, here's what it is. The key word is to build division. Is RIZIN willing to invest on that division is the big issue, I think, Right now, it's not like, it seems like obviously Sakakibara is more interested in heavyweight, right, than the women. So
I think the problem is I think RIZIN, in my opinion, they're willing to work with what they have. When they had Rena and Kana Asakura, they had two very charismatic, popular fighters. So they built a division around them. They did the Grand Prix. Izawa has proven to kind of be not as charismatic, and she's not really getting a lot of interest. And so RIZIN's just putting it on the back burner, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of hard to handpick a female fighter from other part of the world to kind of build a division around Izawa too, because they would have to go reach out to, either strawweight or atomweight, little bigger part of that, atomweight fighters, and almost all of them are looking at UFC. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to convince them to come and commit, 3-4 fights, right?
To be,
fight contract. So,
I mean, yeah, it's tricky with the atomweight division because the UFC doesn't have it. The only people that really have it is like Combat Global and Invicta FC, or some of the Korean promotions.
Right.
And so it's kind of a small pool that you're working with already.
Very small, right? And lots of atomweight fighters are willing to build up and take a chance in UFC's strawweight.
Yeah.
I mean, you see that from, like, I would say about 25% of strawweights in the UFC is actually natural atomweight, right?
Well, I would say it was even higher in the beginning.
Yeah, it was higher, right? I mean, I can name like even Michelle Watterson to Jessica Penne, right? Everybody atomweight. So, yeah. So, yeah, I guess so. We'll see what happens to Hamasaki. I think she'll do at least another fight or two, and let's see if they were going to do Suda versus Oshima, like what Izawa wants it, or RIZIN will maybe sit and wait till Reina is ready to fight Izawa, something like that.
Right. It's kind of interesting because from what I've been talking to some people, and it kind of sounds like RIZIN really wants the Izawa versus Reina fight.
Oh yeah. For a long time, that's what they wanted. Yeah.
To the point that like the other female fighters are just kind of like twiddling their thumbs on the side because RIZIN won't commit to them because if Rena's healthy, this is the fight they want to put together.
Right. So we'll see, and then after that, what's going to happen, right? So we'll see.
I will say, on a side note, on the Deep Jewels card, there was a lot of the fights were fun, but only some of them I would qualify as like being high level fights. I mean, and I would say the other fighter that stood out to me is one that you're very familiar with, is Yoko Higashi.
Yeah.
Looked leagues. I mean, she looked like she didn't even belong in the cage with her opponent. It was like watching a professional fighter beat up someone who's never trained before.
Yeah. Her weight class, it's really hard to find a, good opponent, I would say. And I'm looking to get her back into Invicta, because the last Invicta fight, she had to fight a fighter who didn't make the weight. So I think she deserves another chance. And I think Shannon is ready to give her that. So, yes, I agree. In her weight class, it's not much competition for her. So,
well, what I really liked was I pointed her out to my wife was that when she's on the ground, she is always punching her opponent. She is always striking. She's always moving. She's always doing damage. It was like really refreshing to see, actually.
Yeah. She needs to be active. And last fight in Invicta, she really couldn't do much. She gave up on her back pretty quickly. So I think
she had just bad luck in the US because they didn't have her weight class. She had to go up in weight to fight in the PFL.
Right, PFL. She fought in upper weight class, and she did all right. Considering she fought in much heavier. A girl, one of the fighters she fought went to the final, right? So that proves that she has what it takes to hang in there. So I am looking to get her back into Invicta pretty soon. So all right, let's talk about this another one. One Championship Japan. Now, did you watch?
So I wasn't able to watch it because I was at the Deep Jewels show that's happening at the same time.
That's what I thought. But people in the USA like us, I guess they had some streaming issues, so they put everything up on YouTube for free.
Yeah, Japan's the only place where you still have to pay for the pay-per-view.
And, I think it's funny to say it. It's some people tweeted it. I mean, X posted on the X that the One Championship Japan show, this is what, third time? And probably the most successful one. And tickets were really sold out on Saitama Super Arena. And this is what probably Abema and K1 has been working for the last couple of years. And because of Takeru's popularity and kickboxing popularity, and now it's on UNX, but it became it became a very good show. And finally, it seems like after 2-3 tries, the one championship did show that it's actually profitable, right? It seems like.
Absolutely.
And I heard it was very hard to get the tickets.
So if you compare it to the previous Japan show, where I had heard stories of Rakuten employees being given stacks of 5 free tickets apiece.
Sure.
No stories of that for this event.
Nope.
This event, and I think it was the 23,000 seat setup for Saitama, and it looked packed. When you see the pictures, clearly their most successful Japan show.
Well, yeah, it was very successful, and what happened was that even like some of my client had a hard time getting tickets. Like Ren, he had to post on X that I couldn't get a good seats, and he had to rely on his friend, replying and get a closer seats and stuff like that. So yeah, it was pretty. But the point is this: I think because of Takeru's fight against Rotan is that one major reason why this was a huge event, right? And
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
And because in the theory, if Takeru beats Rotan, which didn't happen, he could have, sort of like redeem that loss against Tenshin, right? So that was the whole theory and the theme behind that fight, and it didn't turn out to be what it is. But besides that, we had 2 Japanese fighters winning, taking the title, right? Noji and Wakamatsu, which made it very, very successful. I thought.
Yeah. So the biggest unfortunate factor is that Takeru lost the way he did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was just blown out of the water like in the first round, which I mean, every time Takeru's now fought in Japan for one championship, he's lost. So that's not good. But the thing that makes it easy to swallow for the Japanese crowd is that other Japanese fighters did very well on the card. Like you said, Wakamatsu
those was a big upsets, right? Supposed to be. I mean, in terms of odds wise, they were not the favorite at all. And my God, I'm so happy for Wakamatsu,
Right. Not only did he get revenge, he won the championship doing it. So
right, yeah, and against ATT fighter, which works, pretty well for the Japanese crowd. And not only that, I think Wakamatsu is the guy who really had maybe a chance to even go to the UFC. But back then, remember, UFC was maybe getting rid of flyweight divisions, and they released Naoki and all kinds of stuff. So he chose one, and he's already 30 years old, father of what, 2, whatever that is, and finally, after 6 years of won championships, he got the title, which I'm very happy for him. And it's funny that some of his friends and associates emailed me immediately after that, asked me like, "Oh, do you think he go to UFC now?" But no, I don't think so, because he became a champion. I'm sure there's a championship clause where it extends his contract. So it'll be much better and smarter for him to just concentrate defending that titles.
Now that he's a champion, I imagine he is in a position to make some pretty good money in one championship.
I mean, a decent money. I mean, I'm pretty sure better than the entry level money on the UFC.
Yeah,
to get to that point in the UFC, you would have to win like 10 fights, probably, right?
Because one championship does seem to have a very wide pay range, but they do seem to pay their champions quite well.
It's okay. Yeah, I mean, they just revealed how much they paid to Rotan, right? So.
Really, I didn't see that. How much did they pay?
Yeah, they did. With a 50-grand bonus, almost $500,000, little less than that.
Yeah.
Again, sure, compared to like a pay-per-view shares the champions in UFC makes, it's tiny. But look at all these ex-champions who no longer has any titles, who's still fighting. Their purse is going down dramatically, obviously, right? And some of them fighting for way less than what Rotan made. So you can make a wild guess, as long as one can make him active, at least put him in fight twice a year, then I think it makes sense for him to stay, And
outside of him, the Muay Thai guy, Nadaka, also won.
Right, yeah.
Remember back when he very smartly turned down that Tenshin fight?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't they? RIZIN tried to get him to go up in weight and fight Tenshin on late notice.
Right, yeah.
It's probably a smart thing he turned that down.
Right. And now, he looks really good. So we'll see. if like face it, one championship right now has the best kickboxing, right?
Yeah.
League. So I think it's the right move for him to be there, right?
Mhm.
Almost all the kickboxers, that makes sense. So, and let's see what they're gonna do to Takeru, because Takeru is not the cheapest fighter on the roster. So are they gonna build him back up, or
They have to
release him, or we'll see.
and they don't have to, but it'd be foolish of them not to build him back up.
Exactly, because the success of the Japan show this time heavily relies on Takeru's popularity, right? I mean,
Shinya Aoki's not selling tickets, so I think
not anymore. But I was so impressed with the he won. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
again, he's what, 41? He's like, and he said that he wants one to come up with a kind of way for him to retire properly. That's what he says in after the fight. So we'll see if they could do that. I mean, and I think one could make him active as a grappler too, because they do grappling matches, right? So again, so a guy like Aoki, who never went to UFC, probably has been making a very good living, right? So if you play it right, kind
They've
of makes sense.
extended his career by like 15 years, I feel like.
Oh yeah, I know. And
But
face it, in terms of Japanese market, just because Aoki went to one, that really built the one's brand too in Japanese market.
but I will say, do you know what one championship's biggest problem in Japan is?
What is it?
Chatri himself. Seeing what he's been saying about Kaito.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I mean, I kind of understand what he meant, because it's a big show for a little bit of overweight. You should just take the penalty and the fight, right? I mean, but it's a professional world, and if you knew it, they have to make that weight. If you don't, then there's always a danger that you don't. That fight doesn't happen. So the responsibility goes to the fighter who didn't make the weight.
Well, absolutely, and I feel like there's a very big cultural divide on missing weight.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I talk to Japanese fans about missing weight, they have like no mercy. It's like, oh, you missed weight.
Yeah, that's actually a Japanese typical characteristics. Japanese are really hard on one tiny mistake. I mean, look at all these politicians who make a little tiny mistake. They would have to deal with the hours of press conferences, sometimes even have to resign. I always tell my guys that in Japan, you make one mistake, you got to do 10 good things. In American corporation, you can make 10 tiny mistakes, but if you do one good thing, you can advertise yourself on that and make a promotion, right? So, it's a different mentality. And yeah.
I mean, so there's a very strong judo and wrestling culture in Japan, and people are just used to like, you do not miss weight. That is your responsibility. So where I feel like in the West, like in America, people are like, it's just half a pound, take the fight. In Japan, there's a lot more of a mindset of like, you didn't meet your obligations. Why should I be the one to bend, kind of thing?
Let me tell you this, Charlie. Long time ago, when I used to do translation work when I was in college, I went to visit many politicians or Japanese politicians, engineers, or visiting, during the so-called corporate inspections. Or anyway, once I did that for the JR. Back then it was called Kokutetsu, like a Japanese rail company. They came to Boston and they were in discussions of making a train, high-speed trains. Americans' concept is you expect mistakes and accidents. That's their concept. So you build all the plans, everything around the fact that we're going to make a mistake. We're going to have some death, accident. We're going to have this accident. That. Japanese concept is different. They were going for perfectionists. They're like, no, we're going to go towards no death, no accident. They always say, look at Shinkansen. Since 1970s, there's zero death cases. Like Tokyo subway, once they put the home platform, zero accidents. You know what I mean? Like, so they're looking for zero. So in terms of, like,
it's
weight
the same in the IT world.
Yeah.
Is the reason that like Microsoft and Apple destroyed all of the Japanese companies is because the Western emphasis was to be the first to put your product on the market.
Right.
Where Japan was like, we can't put it on the market until it's perfect.
Exactly, right.
And by the time they release their computer, everybody's already bought Microsoft and they're not willing to change over to a new system.
Exactly. So it's the same thing for the weight cut. You're not supposed to make mistakes. So it's like making, losing, not making weight for like 0.5 grams. it's still a big deal. It's like the same deal. It's like when politicians have affairs or have some embezzlement thing. They make a huge deal about that. So it's the cultural thing.
Well, it kind of. I mean, the same thing happened back when it's not as a Japanese thing. Because remember when Itsuki missed weight, Ham Sohi took it as an insult and refused to take the fight as well. So
yeah.
Also, I think what was interesting to me was when Chatri was kind of railing into Kaito, the comment he made, I can understand him being upset that he wouldn't take the fight, but the comment that was the stupid comment to me was when he said, you should go back to fighting at those little promotions you fight at.
See, that's the one word he didn't need to say that, right?
And I'm like, so you mean because Kaito fights for Rise, K1, and shoot boxing, you just insulted every Japanese kickboxing organization.
I'm sure he meant that too, in a way, right? Because he's been saying that the one is in a completely different level from any other promotions, even including RIZIN. So
yeah, but then he comes out and says something like, "I want to work together. Let's collaborate to build up the kickboxing scene." And then a week later, he says something insulting them. So he's putting his own foot in his mouth.
Yeah, I mean, again, so hopefully now because of this successful Japan show, if they regroup and even sign good kickboxers, and I'm hearing that this time they signed some of the guys, including Kaito, to just a 1-fight contract.
Yeah,
maybe that's the reason why he Chatri was not ready to go, right? But really, they need to build fighters, and when you sign fighters, there's investment too, right? You got to invest on that fighters to become a so-called popular talent that sell tickets and pay-per-views. So yeah, hopefully they'll give him another chance, because face it, for kickboxers, there's not much places they can make good money.
No,
unfortunately, right? So all right, so dude, let's talk about this quickly, because I want to talk about Horiguchi back to UFC. Everybody's talking about it. I'm hearing it's already done deal.
Yeah, if Ariel Helwani is talking about it, he didn't say it was set and done, but he made it seem like he's already talking about what event they're thinking of and who the opponent is supposedly going to be. So I think it's a pretty done deal.
Yeah, and then on top of that, actually, I can reveal this now, that how Naoki's fighting next weekend, and if he wins with no injuries, there was a talk, RIZIN wanted Naoki to fight Horiguchi in May 4th. But that went out the window, and that was a good sign, right? So I'm like, okay.
Well, as soon as Sakakibara said we're going to do a heavyweight Grand Prix,
right?
I'm like, oh, Horiguchi's gone.
Gone, right? And I heard a rumor that they were trying to talk to Mick Maynard to get Horiguchi in there, but couldn't convince Mick. So Dan Lambert went straight to Dana White and did the deal. So yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. I mean, even though he's not young anymore. He was Bellator champion, RIZIN champion. There's not many resume. You got a fighter with that kind of resume outside the UFC now, right? So,
no, he's for the division. He's one of the most established. You can't find a more established fighter than him.
And face it, flyweight, it's not the most exactly the popular, division in UFC. So they need something like that,
I have a question. So I was looking at it. If they, with the signing of Horiguchi, they actually have a pretty substantial Japanese roster now.
I think so, right.
And they could easily do a Japan show with Kai, Asakura, and Horiguchi on the card, and it would sell out immediately.
Well, and Taira and Tsuruya would be fine.
Exactly. When you add in Mizuki, Taira, Ray,
they don't really need to see all Japanese fighters top to bottom anyway,
Well, I mean, you can also put people like Manel Cape on the card, or Edie on the card, people that used to fight in Japan.
I think the key would be who is going to sponsor that show, because company like Docomo has been showing interest in working an MMA show. Even Next will be the possibility, or who knows, even Abema too, right? Because I think Next would have to renew the contract to UFC. I think next year or something like that, or this year, because it was a 3-year contract, I heard. So we'll see. But again, this is what I have to say. Even Kai too. The problem about the Japanese top fighters like that, once you fight once, they take too long a break. You know what I mean? Like Kai should have been back in the cage in 3 months and keep fighting so he can establish himself. He's already established in the Japanese market, but still, literally nobody really knows him in the world stage, right? So, he's got to look at the guy like Alex Pereira to Justin Cagey to even back then Tony Ferguson, how they're really active. That's the way to gain
Window's short. You gotta when you're in your prime, you gotta fight as much as you can.
Right. So they should even try to fight 3 times a year, although it's hard to do that in the UFC. So, but in that case, I think Horiguchi was the one of the guy who was pretty active always.
Oh, yeah.
In the back then, Mizugaki was like that too. So the active guys established themselves in the UFC. So
Rising Will Die makes the comment that most of the Japanese prospects are coming off of losses in the UFC. If Horiguchi also loses, what does that say? Well, I think the Raid Sudaya fight was actually quite close. And
I could still say that though. Knowing UFC, they're gonna ban Horiguchi against a pretty tough guy. And if even though Horiguchi loses, that's fine with UFC. They could just prove it to the world that we're the best.
Yeah.
I mean, they're probably saying that about Kai too. He was a bantamweight champion in Rising, went down to flyweight and literally really couldn't do much, right? So,
I have a question. I don't know if you would know, but with Horiguchi going from Rising to the UFC, what kind of pay do you think? Do you have any idea what kind of pay he's getting?
That would be depends on what kind of money he was making in Bellator.
Okay.
And I think he'll be pretty competitive because Bellator and / PFL, they would have to either release him or end his contract, right? That's why he was entering in the period where he could talk to the UFC, at least the exclusive, non-matching period. So I think they'll match similar amount as he was making in the Bellator. So I think he'll be making pretty good money.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. And considering how Japanese yen is so much weaker than American dollars, it only makes sense to earn money in USD.
Well, that's because I think Kana Watanabe is fighting soon in PFL.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, her fighting in the US just must seem like a brilliant move.
But yeah, it is. It only makes sense.
Dollars. She's getting paid more than any woman in Japan.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And yeah, that's what it is. I mean, right now, my sister lives in Japan, married to American man, probably moving back to States soon, because we all realize we need to earn money in USD. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the 200 yen to $1 era comes. Yeah.
For those that aren't too familiar, when I studied abroad in Japan when I left Japan after I taught English here in 2010, the yen was particularly strong. And I think it was like 96 yen to the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
It has been riding 150.
I know. Remember, very first UFC show, it was like $1 to almost 75 yen or something like that. So for sponsors in Japan, Dentsu, it was easy to pay that money.
So essentially, and plus the Japanese economy it's been doing well, but it hasn't been trickling down to the actual people. So like all the prices are rising. There's inflation. Cost of products is rising. No one's salary is increasing. So I mean, a lot of these, I wouldn't be surprised if you see more fighters looking to go earn some foreign currency.
Yeah, you know what? Then let's talk about this one. Asia Road to UFC begins on May 24th.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry. Before we moved on, Muhammad's comment does remind me. So I think he's right. I think Ariel did mention that Koji is supposed to be fighting on the Azerbaijan show.
Okay.
And against Tiger Ulanbekov, which I thought was kind of funny. I was wondering, like, is the UFC using Rising's connections to put on an Azerbaijan show?
I don't know.
But they don't need that, so they're powerful enough about that.
I mean, then he should be able to beat him, I hope,
Yeah, I think he's like ranked 11th or something.
Right. And then that'll put him into ranking immediately and put him into maybe one fight into the title fights, right? But again, he has to win, so we'll see. But I think Horiguchi still got, in his tank, make a run in that ranking system. So we'll see.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add.
But no, let's talk about that because, like you say, a lot of fighters are probably looking for foreign money, and Asia Road to UFC. I know a few names Japanese who is in there, but I also know a few names that says no to the offer.
Interesting.
You'd be surprised, but that's because the concept they have is this: is R2U versus Rising. For the Japanese fighters' point of view, even though you may be making better money fighting for road to UFC because of yen versus dollar. Still, many fighters prefer fighting for RIZIN for the following reasons. One is absolute popularity or recognition you get in Japan, right?
Mhm.
And two, sponsorship money that they can earn are much higher than the money you make from the Venom. And
Yeah.
three, sometime in road to UFC takes more than a year to finish, meaning you only get maybe twice a fight, two fights per year, right? And but rising, sometime you can fight three or maybe even four times a year, right? So that makes a little difference in terms of income, or
Well,
even though USD is much stronger.
I have a question. So, with Kaya Sakura, Manel Cape, Edie all going to the UFC, and now Horiguchi going to the UFC, could there now be a mindset that if I go to Rising and do well, I can go to the UFC anyway?
They are a mindset like that, but in a reality, let's say it's really funny. I'll tell you this: Japanese fighters you can separate into two types. One who understand that the benefit of having multi-fight deals. So if you have a 3-4 fights deal, and if you have a clause in the contract, so if you don't lose two in a row, they can't cut you, which means they have to give you that 4 fights and make you active. So you're guaranteed to get that 4 fights, which is one concept. But there are a lot of fighters, believe it or not, they don't trust promotion's future, or they're just not feeling comfortable besides just a 1 fight contract. So there are a lot of fighters in Japan that even though they fight for Rising, they insist on 1 fight contract, 1 fight contract at a time. Even the big names, you'd be surprised.
Well, I think
And,
we all know of a famous fighter that once demanded a crazy short contract with the UFC. Allegedly, no
right,
names.
exactly right. I'm already blocked from that person, so I don't know what the hell's going on. But that's what it is. So it's funny. They always ask for 1 fight contract, those fighters, but yet they'd still prefer Rising over UFC. Even in the contract status wise, they could easily go to the UFC or go to the road to UFC. They will still think a couple days. And most of the time, they come up with answers is like, well, I'm going to try. I'm supposed to get a next fight in Rising, so I'll go with that. You know.
So this is just a question. I don't know what your thoughts are. Do you ever feel like that sometimes the person, because a lot of fighters will just do whatever their coach tells them to do, and a lot of coaches have connections to promotions where they just this is where I feed my fighters to. Do you think some of
That
these fighters get pressured not to go to the UFC?
right, that too. But here's what it is. It seems like coach and fighters sort of kind of understand that once you go to Rising, you kind of establish that relationship. So you don't want to really burn that bridge.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of coaches and fighters actually contact me and says, I'm 20, 21, 22, whatever. They decide to just concentrate on either road to UFC or the Rising, either those two. That's it. So lots of fighters, even though I suggest like, well, you could go to Rising and get a couple fights, establish your record. Many replies and says like, no, I prefer keep it myself in the deep or Pancras or Shuto and shoot for the next year's road to UFC. So they don't really begin any relationship with Rising. And if they burn that bridge or get out, they might cause some issues to the other teammates or coaches. They don't want to do that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
Japanese think that ahead in a way, the fighters. So
That's why I asked, because I just know that a lot of them probably don't want to break these existing relationships.
yeah, exactly. And to answer your first question, even though let's say Horiguchi is going there and Kai is in there now and Taira is doing well and Tsuruya is doing well, whatever, it still seems like doesn't really attract many fighters, not quite yet, because still a lot of fighters look at the Rising as a good stage for you to make money. And it's just if you live in Japan, right? If you don't care about what's going on in Japan, you know that all these Japanese people only care about what's going on in that island. So,
Absolutely.
the bottom line is that you're popular, people around you, friends, family say, "Oh, that's great, you're fight for Rising," and then if you're making good money, then they really feel like they don't need to take that risk. You know?
It's interesting because you don't talk to fighters here that have no idea what's going on in the UFC. They don't know who any UFC fighters are. So it very much is like the island mindset of where people
Yes,
in
it
Japan
is.
really just only pay attention to what's happening in Japan.
Right. I mean, I can't name names yet, but the couple of fighters in RIZIN, which is managed by myself, they still want to go to UFC.
Yeah.
They're still looking for that right timing, which is when their contract is over and when they enter that matching period. But at the same time, it's funny. All these guys who's looking at the UFC will tell me this: I'm going to take a pay cut. So they feel like they're going to have to take a pay cut to get to the UFC, but they still wants to do it. So the fighter with that kind of mindset always think about the UFC. But if you think about earnings and popularity, and then you kind of go towards RIZIN. I think that's what's happening in Japan.
I will say something interesting I've discovered recently is that I was talking to Miki Matono ahead of her last fight, and at least to her and some other fighters, if you're looking to get on the road to UFC, or if you're looking to go to UFC, in their mind, Pancrase is the promotion you join. So that's kind of interesting to see, like what I don't know if it reflects reality. I just think it's interesting to see what the fighters are thinking.
Yeah, but point is, you can go fight for Shuto, you can go fight for Deep, and you can still go there.
Well, I put all the names together, and the two promotions that send the fighters to the UFC are Shuto and Pancrase.
Right, yeah.
Deep feeds its fighters into RIZIN.
RIZIN,
and Shuto and Pancrase feed their fighters into the UFC.
Generally, yes.
That's what I noticed when I put the names together.
Right. But again, when you look at the road to UFC, there are fighters from Deep who went to enter that tournament too. So you see, like that's against a very interesting Japanese mentality. They think some company to company always have that kind of a relationship. But hey, they say UFC doesn't care about Pancrase or Shoes or Deep. They don't care. The point is they only care about the good fighters. So but here's what it is. I think Motono already know, but this year's road to UFC, they try to not use the repeat fighters anymore. Yeah. So most of the fighters who fought in last year did not make it. Even though the fighters who had a good performance. So I mean,
I just think it's interesting because I feel like a lot of Japanese fighters just don't understand the UFC.
They don't.
Foreign fight promotions at all.
Here's what it is, though. But also, I understand in a way that once you enter that atmosphere of fighting in the UFC, even though road to UFC is not a UFC, you enter that octagon, you go through that fight week, you realize it's like a major league, big time. Stay in nicer hotel, better crowd. It seems like a much better, bigger world level production, whatever that is. So once you experience that, it's like a drug. Once you experience that, like this is different. Mr. Saito, pro wrestler, told me this once that once you fight in front of the big crowd in Tokyo Dome, it's like a drug. You can't just get out of it, and you feel like this is where you want to be. So even though you're not a UFC fighter, once you fight for road to UFC, once you experience that stage, you feel like that's the place I need to go.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like a strong drug. I really think so.
Well, you talk to some of the fighters, they go to like the UFC or like even like Black Combat. They're just amazed at how they're treated, like the level of care they're given by the promotions once they show up.
That's not even comparison in the UFC too, because they got the PI staff preparing meals to everything. But again, like me, I corner many clients in UFC shows that I have to agree with the fact that yes, once you experience that big UFC shows, it's nothing replaces that really. Even I've been to big 50,000 shows in Japan too, but it's quite different, So I understand that, but also I think fighters need to understand one big thing that a lot of fighters don't realize. It's damn hard to make a living playing sports. I'm really like people don't realize that. I mean, behind Shohei Ohtani, millions of dreams being shattered, right? I mean, so many athletes never made it. And for some reason, some fighters in Japan think it's a little easier to make a living out of playing sports. And it really isn't. And that's why you really need to look at your career and determine where you're at,
Especially with the UFC, though, I feel like they're so used to kind of like these, like my manager has a long established relationship with this promotion, so they're able to get me fights there. Where the UFC is just like, can you make us money? Like this is the fight this is like also the entertainment business, pay-per-view business. Like you need to be able to draw money yourself, or else we're not particularly interested in you.
Yeah, or unless if you win all the time. I look at it. I mean, more than 50% of fighter doesn't last after first contract, which means 4 fights. Many fighter gets cut after 1 or 2 or 3 fights too, right? So, no, that's my point. Here's what it is. I've spoken with some of the young fighters like in this manner. Like, my God, I would never do what you do. I don't think I can ever beat those the Gestanians and all these big Russian guys. What are you thinking? Do you really think you can beat these guys? Make a living? Think about it, right? I mean, if you don't have what it takes to play in the major league and stick with the Japanese baseball or Taiwan league, whatever it is, and make good money, that's a good way to make a living, right? So, yeah. So, some coaches, like Connor's coach, says that there's one way to enjoy MMA is to stay amateur as well. It's the way to enjoy sports. So now go back to this ratio road to UFC versus RIZIN. Hey, if you want to raise your family and pay kids college tuition, fighting, what do you think is your right choice, right? I mean,
well, it all just depends. Like, how much are you willing to gamble? Like, do you think you can be the best in the world? Because if you do, you can make way more money in the UFC.
Of course. Point is this also, of course, ultimately you have to shoot for the best in the world, but you have what it takes to really hang in there for 5, 10 years, to make a career out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so like I've asked young fighters, are you really willing to do this career? And do you think you can pay your kids college tuition and make sure they graduate from school kind of stuff? But again, when you're in 20s, you really don't think that kind, right? So yeah, that's why a lot of fighters still either go for UFC, road to UFC, or the RIZIN. It's really separated.
I think based on their decision, you can tell a lot about the fighter themselves.
Yeah, exactly right. But smart ones do make good decisions, and also the confidence, real good ones do make a right decision too. I mean, yeah, look at Horiguchi in that sense. Yeah. So that's the case, I think.
If his follow-up UFC career goes well, he played this perfectly.
So we'll see, right? Let's hope he'll do well.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So the last one, let's do RIZIN 50 preview.
Yeah.
I mean, they just announced about older. I think Naoki versus Motoya is the right. I mean,
well, clearly that's the main event. Yeah.
Right. And they put the heavyweight fight right after the intermission. I think
they want people around for that one.
Right. So it seems like we watched the RIZIN confession and everything else, and it seems like a lot of fighters or the fans are like hoping maybe Motoya will win. And ever since their first encounter, Motoya fought like 14 times versus Naoki 7 times.
Right? Yeah, when I saw that, I had to go check. I couldn't. Motoya, say you will, is a very active fighter.
He did more than the double the rounds than Naoki did on the last 4 years.
This will be what, his 50th fight?
Yeah, that's what the Shingo was saying. This is RIZIN 50, and this is his 50th pro fights. So this may be it, right?
But I mean, at that level, I don't know the volume. I mean, if anything, I think the volume of his fights might work against him. The amount of damage he's been taking.
Yeah, I know. And here's what it is. Let's not go on roots, but this is the first time in a long while that Naoki never sent me a message say, I'm injured. Can I get in touch with doctor this, doctor that kind of stuff? Never happened on this fight camp. So let's hope, right? I mean, this may be the first time in a long time that you see a real healthy Naoki fighting. So
this is going to be like sea-level Cain Velasquez.
We'll see. But here's one thing I'm very surprised about this RIZIN 50 in Kagawa is this one is sold out.
Well, I mean, for an event that's one of the regional events,
yes,
it's a pretty good card.
Yes, but this is in Shikoku Island, which is really regional, right? I mean, it's easy accessible like Nagoya or something like that. By the way, RIZIN is another show I heard in Hokkaido at the end of June. So they're really reaching out to the regional market.
Yeah.
The fact that they're selling out this fast, I think it's really RIZIN reached to this status where the RIZIN, the brand name itself, is kind of established throughout Japan.
Yeah.
So once you put up a show on a remote regional area, I think the regional fans who doesn't really have a chance to go to Tokyo and see those shows will get excited, right? And before even the cards are finalized, they buy tickets. And that's a very, very good sign, I think.
Plus, I know the hardcore fans will travel from Tokyo to go there anyway.
Right. And a new arena too, right? So, so I think, again, RIZIN is doing well within Japan. Yeah.
Well, it's smart. It's like the old pro wrestling thing where if you move it around the country, it's always special. So everyone that's going there, it's not there every night. So it's here in Kagawa at this day. So everyone that's interested is going to go.
Right. And in the prime Pride days, like when they had the Bushido, so hopefully they don't have to create Bushido kind of thing, but I hope they'll do maybe even 20, 25 shows per year.
Yeah.
That's when they can really establish weight classes.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's going to be very difficult.
I mean, to your point, it is crazy that this is the first RIZIN event of the year, like going into April almost.
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, all these Japanese promotions, they don't have the shows in January and February.
Not at all. I don't know if there's just like fatigue from the New Year's holidays or something, and everyone's doing their Shinenkais.
Right.
There's just a 3-month break to me just kills all of the momentum from New Year's Eve.
I agree. They should have done the show in January, Yeah. Anyway, so out of this card, any card besides the title fight that you will be looking forward to?
I mean, Spike Carlisle's back. That's fun. He's always exciting. Hagiwara's back. That's fun. But clearly, the two fights that stick out to me outside of the main event, I mean, the Ed Polo King, they're clearly prepping him for the heavyweight tournament that they want to do.
Right, yeah.
And I have to give some attention to the only women's fight on the card, the Machi fight, which, despite being at 52 kilograms, should be fun.
Yeah, agree. And also, I thought that Hagiwara's and Toby Misich fight is kind of interesting in a way that they're both far from having a winning record.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess they still feel that Kyohei is a good talent that could move tickets. So
I mean, it is refreshing. If you look at the card, there's actually, for a regional show too, they have a bunch of good international talent on the card.
Right. And they put Yuki against Tommy Lalami too, which is probably preparing for the Flyweight Grand Prix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm hearing the Heavyweight Grand Prix is the 8-man tournament, and now the Flyweight Grand Prix is also going to be 8-man tournament.
So what'll that be? That'll be
I think it will start July.
So they'll do that. So it'll be 8 or 4 fights.
And I think
they're not going to do 2 fights in one night. Are they going to break it up?
I think so. Yeah, they were saying. I had some messages. They're going to finish. I think they're planning to finish a Heavyweight Grand Prix a little bit earlier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like on the September show or something.
First, I think the final will be September, like a semifinal July. So same for I think almost Flyweight. It starts at July, semifinal September, and final New Year's Eve.
So for the heavyweight, are they bringing in some predominantly foreign fighters for that?
I heard that they're reaching out to each promotions all over the world to try to convince them to dispatch one of their heavyweight talent. So
that's cool. Kind of like the way that RIZIN used to be back in the day.
Yeah, heavyweight from KSW or heavyweight from RS, whatever that is. Yeah, I don't know if that's going to work, but that's what I'm hearing.
Because from Japan, you got to think they're going to do Ed Polo King and they're going to do Ueda, right?
Yeah, I think so. They would have to put those 2 guys in there. So 6 other non-Japanese, right? Mm-hmm. To make it look like a world tournament. So we'll see. I mean, I think it's going to be very hard to find really good, legitimate 8 heavyweight fighters. When
I just wish that RIZIN still had Tafa, because Tafa was good, but yeah.
Oh, I know. I mean, that's right. But again, like UFC and PFL has most of the heavyweights, right? So
that's true. Do you think Sudario would take part?
Maybe they do, because he has at least a name, right, in Japan. But it's going to be very difficult for him to win.
I've been reading. I heard some people saying that ever since he split ways with Insen, it took like a big blow to his popularity.
I don't know. I mean, I know he was in Vegas training and stuff like that. So it's like breaking off Insen such a big news in Japan.
I just like some fans feel like it's like a betrayal kind of thing.
Yeah, like again, besides the weight cut, they make a huge deal about changing teams. Yeah, I've heard some fighter were demanded to pay some gym like a changing fee of like 50 grand kind of stuff when the guy was fighting for like $2,000. Yeah, I mean, okay, yeah, exactly. So I let's see if they're gonna get heavyweight guys,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
they've always been able to find a couple of heavyweights, so I think they shouldn't have a problem.
right. Oh, and maybe they'll invite the Russian dude. I
Oh, the
forgot their
twins?
names. Those brothers.
The Shimov twins, whatever.
Yeah. Are they still active on
I think
X?
they've toned down their pleas to come back to RIZIN, but that'd be hilarious if they brought them back.
I know, that'd be hilarious. Yes. Okay. All right. So I guess that's it for this week.
Well, let me see.
Yeah. What else do we have?
Well, I did think it was kind of interesting going more deeply into the Naoki versus Montoya fight.
Okay.
I thought that was kind of interesting because I mean Naoki's gone 5-2, Montoya's gone 11-3. But if you look at their opponents, I mean Naoki's really only lost to super high stamina wrestlers.
Yes.
Guys that just never get tired, who are grinders.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not Montoya.
No, that's not Montoya. But Montoya needs to scramble here, though. I mean, I don't think he'll have any chance against Naoki on standing.
So Montoya, though, he's training at American Top Team for this, right?
Hmm?
That's kind of interesting because Naoki used to always have the like trained in America image, but now it's kind of switched.
Yeah, for now, I think he feels it's probably safer to train in Japan. Because the last twice he went to kill Cliffy, both time he got injured.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's more like a karma thing too.
Well, also, I mean, if you're fighting in Japan, it's probably just nicer to be in Japan for the whole fight camp.
Yeah, and also I think he's comfortable with his training environment now. So
is he training with Mizugaki still?
Mizugaki, Yasuda at the Sonic Squat, and Nick Nagasue and for striking with Shiro and everything else. So I think he feels comfortable. I think, but I can tell you right now, he's only got 2 fights left on RIZIN contract. Knowing his character, his personality, you know what he'd be telling me, right?
Mizugaki did quite well at Deep Jewels. I think all the fighters he seconded won.
Really?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta talk to Mizugaki because soon they're all gonna receive the UFC antitrust money, and I'm hearing fighters like Brock Lesnar to Ronda to Monogela, everybody rejected it. They didn't even register. Mm-hmm. They don't want to take the money, and so is 90% of the Korean fighters and stuff like that. So those unregistered money will go to the registered money fighters. So I'm happy for all of them.
Why are they rejecting it? Because they don't need the money, or?
I really don't know.
Is it like a respect thing? It's like I don't want the UFC's money or something.
Some people thinks they don't want to be on the bad side of the UFC, which I don't know, and some thinks they didn't register, so they didn't give up their rights. So in down the road, they can do their own lawsuits. I don't know. I have no idea. You probably know. You're an attorney. Yeah.
That's why I'm more just confused on why someone would turn it down. But okay.
Yeah, I mean, and
have you heard any idea of what kind of money it is?
Yeah, I know, but depends on how many fights you fight and blah, 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 blah. But again, the portion Ronda, Brock are giving up, it's a big part of a chunk of the money.
Yeah, it's going to be split up between the other fighters now.
Right. So that if they've spread to all the other fighters, then I think it's good for them, right?
Mizugaki had quite a few fights in the UFC, if I remember correctly.
Yes. So him and Yushin Okami will be making the most, I think.
Yeah.
And they deserve it, right? I mean, they fought the most. Yeah. I mean, I wish they count WEC and Strikeforce in a fight.
Just not a WEC, Mizugaki would be making a lot of money.
Right, and Mizugaki will be 5 fights in WEC. So
yeah.
All right, so we'll see. And after the next RIZIN, we should do a podcast again.
We'll talk about a little wrap-up show.
Yeah, let's do that for sure.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Thank you for listening, everybody. We'll be back soon. Yeah.